everyone, and welcome to Business Boutique. I'm Christy Wright, and today we are talking about how to learn from failures. I know. Failures are not an exciting thing in life. No one gets excited about failing or even learning from failures, but you know what, friends? They are a reality in life and business, so we might as well learn how to deal with it. Now, here's the thing. I have had a lot. I've had a lot of failures in my life and in Business Boutique and in speaking, and I've had some near failures. So I want to spend this show and this episode teaching you a few ways to deal with it. What do you do when you fail? Is there anything you can do to make it better or even avoid it? That is what we're going to talk about. Now, I'm going to give you 3 tips. If you're taking notes, like I know some of you do, you can follow along. These are 3 tips on what to do about failures. Now, the first one is a little bit of preventative medicine. The first option you have, if possible, is to adjust on the fly. Adjust on the fly. Now, let me give you an example of this. Several years ago, I was booked to speak for Catalyst. This is a major national conference for Christian leaders in ministry and nonprofit. And I was booked to do a breakout session for women on life balance, key word being women. Okay, so I wrote the talk for women. I wrote the stories for women. They were female stories. I wrote the examples as female examples. The teaching was directed at women and what women struggle with when it comes to life balance. I even used stories from the Bible and scriptures that were female stories. So this talk was going to be a home run. It was going to be awesome. Only problem, on that day in that breakout room, I stood at the back of the room next to the AV team and my leader, Jeremy, as the room just continued to fill up as people poured in and found their seats. Only problem, they were all men. That's right. I stood there in the back mentally rehearsing my talk for women as men filled up the room. Do you see the problem here? Now, I'm standing there thinking, what am I going to do? They're going to introduce me in 5 minutes. I have a talk, I have stage notes, and I have slides for a talk to women, and there are no women in this room. Now, in that moment, I had a choice to make. I could do one of 2 things. Option 1, I could go ahead with the talk for women. I could walk to the front. I could say, hey, y'all, I'm so sorry. I thought it was going to be women. Crazy, right? You're men. Anyway, I wrote this for women, and so it may not connect. Sorry about that. Anyway, and launch into my talk for women, right? I could have done that. That would have been the safe route because I was prepared. I was rehearsed. I had slides and notes for a talk for women. Or I could do what I'm actually teaching you to do today. I could adjust on the fly. I could do something else. I could change my talk entirely. And if you know me, then you're not surprised to know that that's exactly what I did. I looked to my leader, Jeremy, and we had about 3 minutes left before they introduced me. And I said, I'm changing my talk. And he said, what? I said, I'm changing my talk. I can't do that talk. It's for women. These are men. It's not going to work. We got to do something. I'm changing my talk. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'll do my entree leadership talk. I have a talk for entree leadership. I know that talk well. I'll give that talk. He said, what about your notes? Luckily, thankfully, Jesus, I had my talk for entree leadership, the notes on my iPad. That was with me. I kept all my notes on my iPad so I could just pull those up. He said, what about the slides? I said, we're not doing slides. Thankfully, it was a small room. It was a pretty intimate environment where I didn't need slides to support my talk. And he said, are you sure about this? Like, you prepared and practiced and rehearsed and planned for a long time to do this talk for women, and you're changing it literally a minute and a half before they're about to introduce your name. I said, I have to. There's men in the room. These are men. It will not work. If I want to make an impact, I've got to do something different. 30 seconds to go. I leaned over to the AV team. I said, hey, scrap the slides. We're not doing slides. They're like, are you sure? I said, yeah, I'm sure. I'm doing a different talk. They're like, okay. They introduced me and I walked to the front and I proceeded to give my entree leadership talk also on life balance, but more directed at men in general. And y'all, the impact was unbelievable. You could truly feel the Spirit of God in that room, and that was the talk I was supposed to give. That was the talk that those men that were burnt out and overworked and tired and exhausted and worn thin, that was the talk they needed to hear. but they only heard it because I was willing to think on my feet. I was willing to act fast. I was willing to adjust on the fly. And if you sense something like that happening in your life, maybe it's not a speaking event that fills up with the wrong gender person than you prepared to talk for, fine. But if you sense something coming, a failure looming, something that feels off, something that feels wrong, something that doesn't feel right, just because you started in that direction doesn't mean you have to stay in that direction. You can adjust on the fly. You can change your mind. You can stop. You can reset, redirect, change your mind, change your plans. You can adjust on the fly. If you do that, you may avoid a failure altogether or at least lessen it. So don't be afraid to adjust on the fly. You know, I've done this multiple times in my career. In fact, a few years ago, I was booked to speak at a conference for steel workers in Decatur, Alabama. And they wanted me to come in and actually speak on life balance as well. I was going to speak every single day to this company, to a different group of them for 4 days in a row. So on the first day, I gave my life balance talk. And if you've heard me talk about this, I talk a lot about working all the time and being connected to technology all the time and always feeling like you're having to work and you can never keep up and the job or the business is so demanding and you never have any free time and you never have, time with your family or time to relax or time to rest. Well, here's the weird thing. I gave that talk to steel workers in Decatur, Alabama on a Monday, and I was planning to give that same talk every day that week. But I really realized after Monday, that wasn't a problem for them. They didn't really struggle with life balance. They didn't struggle with technology. They didn't struggle with never resting. Y'all, these men, they were good. Like, they punch the clock, and when they go home, they watch football and probably drink some beers and go fishing with their friends on the weekend. Like, they're not really struggling, feeling like they're always on connected to their phone. So I realized on Monday, those stories and that teaching wasn't connecting the way that I planned for it to. And so you know what I did? I did a similar thing. I adjusted on the fly. I adjusted my talk for them where they were, the things they struggled with, their stories, their examples, and met them where they were. And the next 3 days, I gave a different variation of that talk that met them where they are. So if you sense something coming down the pike, if you sense something that feels off or feels wrong, or you've got a bad feeling about it, it doesn't mean you have to keep going in that direction. I can't tell you how many meetings that I have been in where the project went wrong or something failed or something fell apart. And inevitably, at least 2 or 3 people raised their hand and said, yeah, I was really worried about that. I thought that was weird. That felt off. I'm like, well, why didn't you say anything? If you sense something is wrong, if you sense a failure looming ahead, adjust on the fly. You don't have to keep going in that direction just because you started in that direction. If you adjust on the fly, you may avoid the failure altogether, which would be ideal. But let's say that you can't. Let's say that you didn't see it coming, you can't adjust, that failure completely caught you off guard, you didn't see it coming. What do you do then? That brings me to number 2. If you experience a mistake or a setback or drop the ball in some way, what I want you to do is deal with it. Now let's talk about what that means. How? How do you deal with failure? How do you deal with a major mistake that you make? Well, I'll give you another example because I have lots of them. So when I was 23, I worked at the YMCA of Middle Tennessee and I was a very young director. I led a team of lifeguards in the aquatic department for a few years. And there was one particular day that I will never forget. I was in my office. Swim lessons were crazy. Swim team was going. Lifeguards had called in sick. It was a chaotic day. So basically every day. And I remember getting a phone call. And I picked up the phone and it was Zach, who was our association aquatic director. So he was over all of the aquatic departments. There were 30 in the Middle Tennessee and Southern Kentucky region. And he said, Christy, this is Zach. Where are your lifeguards? And I was like, at the pool, watching the pool. Why? And he said, why aren't they at the annual mandatory lifeguard training that's happening today? And y'all, my heart sank. Every single year, there was an annual mandatory, did I mention mandatory training that every single lifeguard in the whole association had to attend. And it was my job to make sure that all of my lifeguards got there. They had two options, 9 a.m. or 2 p.m., and he was calling me at 9:15. Every other YMCA was represented there, and I didn't have a single lifeguard. And not only that, hadn't told anyone on my team. I only had the lifeguards watching the pool, which we had to keep there to stay open. I hadn't told anyone about this day to plan for it or, take care of their school studies or anything so that they could be there. And it was 9:15. It was 45 minutes away, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I had dropped the ball. I remembered vaguely the email from a few weeks before, but I had not done anything about it, and now it was too late to get anything done. So I said, here's what we're going to do. I said, Zach, I'm so sorry. I've completely dropped the ball. I'll take care of it. And I hung up with him, and I marched directly down the hall to the executive director's office. I knocked, and I said, Laurel, I've got to tell you something. I'm so sorry, but I've dropped the ball. I've made a huge mistake. I'll fix it, but I need you to know that I'm really, really sorry. She, of course, asked what was going on. I explained that I'd completely forgotten about the email, and I gave her my plan of what I was going to do to fix it. And then, of course, I go into solution mode. I'm doing everything I can to cover shifts and get my lifeguards there. And thankfully, I got almost 100% of my staff to the 2 p.m. training and made up for all of it. But here's what's so important about how I dealt with that situation. First, I owned it. When you make a mistake, it's really natural to make excuses. It's really natural to want to hide. It's really natural to be defensive. It's really natural to point fingers and place blame. Oh, I didn't do it. I didn't mean to. I didn't know. I didn't see the email. It's really natural to do that. But the best thing you can do is face it. If you fail, if you make a mistake, if you drop the ball, do the exact opposite of what your instincts are telling you to run and hide or lie or point fingers. Instead, turn around and face it head on and own it. The first thing you want to do is own it. The second thing that you want to do is apologize for it. Say, I am sorry. Not only did I drop the ball, I'm really sorry that I dropped the ball. And then the third thing that I want you to do to deal with it is you're going to fix it. So you want to own it, apologize for it, and fix it. And I did all three of those things in that scenario where I was dealing with a huge mistake and failure that I had made. But here's the best part. When you deal with it, when you handle mistakes and failures in that way, you actually come out on top. I guarantee you, I built more trust with my executive director and even the association aquatic director because of the maturity and the self-awareness and the integrity that I had. You actually show them what you're made of. You show them that you are trustworthy. You're not perfect, but when you do something wrong, you're honest, you're gonna own it, you demonstrate humility in asking forgiveness, and then you're solution-oriented and you do something about it. It will actually build more trust in you when you handle failures that way. And this is a great lesson for those of you, especially in customer service. If you have someone that's upset with you because you made a mistake, the best thing you can do is deal with it in that way. Own it, apologize for it, and then fix it. Find a solution and do the right thing. If you do that, you'll actually come out with more loyal customers, even customers that you made a mistake with. It's a great opportunity for you as a business leader. All right. So let's say that you can't avoid it, okay? So we're not gonna be able to adjust on the fly. And let's say that you can't even really deal with it because it's just over, it's done, it's maybe not a mistake, it's a failure that's, in your past, and it's something that just haunts you. Here's the best thing that you can do. You just have to dust yourself off. There are going to be some failures that you truly don't even learn from. There might be some failures that just hurt. They wound you, they scar you to the core. Many of you have heard me tell the story about the speaking event that I tried to forget, where I bombed in front of my audience. This was years ago. Still haunts me to this day, as you can tell. And I wanted to crawl under the table and disappear, and I cried my entire drive home to Nashville. That event was not one of those events that I go, man, I'm so glad that happened. That was so great. Just doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. No, I'm not glad that happened. I would never want that to happen again, and I hope it doesn't, and I hope it never happens to you. But you know what? Those things will happen. There will be failures that you can't explain and you would never want to relive, and you would never wish on your worst enemy. And all you can do in those situations is dust yourself off. All you can do is pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and just keep going anyway. Even if there's no magical lesson, even if you never want to relive it, even if you wish it had never happened at all you can do is pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and just keep going anyway. Now, if you can adjust on the fly, you might avoid a failure altogether. And if you can't avoid it, then deal with it. And if you can't deal with it, you know what? Taylor Swift, shake it off. Dust yourself off and keep going anyway. I want to remind you that failures are a reality in life and in business. So if you use these 3 tips, it's going to help you and equip you to know what to do when you're in that situation. And if it's one of those things that just happens, well, you and I both can dust ourselves off and just keep going anyway. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you need a little help shaking the guilt or embarrassment from a recent failure, well, I've got a worksheet that will encourage you. You can download my Shame Off You worksheet by clicking the link below. Now you can check out this next video.